Thank you.
So they sent me your book,
Great.
and I just you know, leadership. Actually, they sent me a PDF because this got arranged quickly. The physical copy didn't come, so you have a copy right there, by the way.
I do.
Look at that. Uh, how did I'm going to ask you about you first.
Sure, sure.
And there is a glut of books on leadership and management.
Right.
So you have the audacity to add to the glut. What do you see yourself adding to the conversation?
That's a good question. For me, this book is brought to you by thousands of leaders that I've had the good opportunity to work with. And many of them have been new leaders. And it's where I get my joy, is to work with that person who's just transitioning from individual contributor to first time leader. And I guess that what maybe makes this book different is a lot of leadership books are written from people who are already established in leadership roles. Oftentimes they're written to the C level or certainly the senior leadership level. And when you move into a new leader role, nobody hands you a playbook. In fact, senior leaders later complain, I wished I had had a playbook when I was starting out. This book kind of becomes the playbook because it's brought to you by not just me, but the thousands of leadership conversations that I've had, like you, and bringing it to the new leader to say, I know it feels hard. I know the honeymoon's over. I know you feel the weight of responsibility, but there are things you can do that if you stay focused on some of the essentials, and I boil them down to 2-word essentials, you're going to do just fine. You're going to land on your feet. You don't have to give up. You don't have to quit. Follow this path and lessons from these other leaders who have gotten there before. Here's the baton we're passing you as part of the leadership playbook. So that's how I view it.
Yeah. So that's a great answer. Thanks, Bill. The new leader is a great person to be involved with. I just took on a new client who is there. They hired him at a senior level, individual contributor, manager, but they really do want him to move into leadership. And so that they hired me to kind of work with him. And it's just a great spot. The high aspiration people,
Yes.
that's anxious to learn, ready to try things. It's a great, great audience.
They're not like fossilized and hardened, and their reception is so much higher, and they're eager, they're seekers, and it makes it a really receptive, great group to work with. And I'm fortunate that that's what I do. I do a lot of design, develop, and deliver for next generation leaders who are on their way, high pose and such.
Yeah.
And I'm in those conversations, at least every 2 weeks, I'm doing some workshop with a group of 40 or 50 of this group. And I've learned from them. And so I sort of captured and cataloged everything I learned from them and other leaders and said, here's the stuff that I think is most essential. There's a lot, because our expectations of leaders are so high, so inflated, so varied. We have so many barometers that we put on them that we're measuring them by. It's, how do you cut through all of that? How do you not feel subsumed if you're new in a leadership role? And this book is kind of essentialism. It's like, let's get back to some of the more simple things. And the other thing that I would say, Dan, is that in my coaching, I have found that when a coachee, typically a new leader, is twined up about something, if they're all cloudy about something, or there's some frustration that's really got them going, if we can together cut through to what matters most in this situation, or what is, if you could narrow it in the fewest words, and often this will be my coaching question, is often, if you could narrow it into the fewest amount of words, what is the crux of this issue, or what is the crux of the solution? The fewer the words that they give me, the more likely they are to actually do the thing to remedy the solution or fix the problem. I'll give you a specific example. I had a guy who wanted to become a partner from associate partner. And all of the partners were like, he's too intense. He wants it too desperately. And he gives off this energy and vibe that other people don't really want him to be over here. And when I worked with him, I said, what do you think? What would the partners need to see to be able to bring you into the partnership? He said, I don't know, calm confidence. And I was like, that's exactly what you need. You need to be showing calm and confidence. What would that look like? Then we explored it and coached around it. And then when he started to go into meetings where they were going to be, he would send me a message and just say, it's time for meeting, CC. And that became our little, clue, calm confidence. And as time has gone on, and I've worked with other leaders in coaching, like thousands of hours of coaching, that I have found that when they narrow it down, oftentimes to distill it into just 2 words, that it's more powerful for them. They're more likely to take remedy over the issue or whatever it is. And so over time, I had put together a bunch of 2-word concepts that I think are essential to leading. And that's what's in the book too.
Yes, and I'm a fan of brevity, as you know. It has to be concise. You got to be so brief it almost doesn't make sense from my point of view. But not everybody does that. But I just want to be so brief that it loses. The more you say, the more power the language loses, like you're saying. So love the 2-word concept. The book is broken down into leading yourself, leading people, and leading work. And then you have these 2-word concepts. So I'm already in, love the idea. Just give me 2 words. And besides that, I mean, my memory, I get too many things in my brain now, so everything's dropping out. So I need I need little short things. I wanted to talk about the practice of humility. I love the language around that, where it says practice humility. It's one of my favorite topics. I think it's neglected in leadership and misunderstood. I asked a very prominent leadership expert what role humility played in their life and in their journey, and they just thought about it a minute and said, nothing. Now, that reflects I think, a misunderstanding and a fear of like what humility isn't. And so anyway, I want to talk with you about humility. And first of all, I notice it says practice humility. I'm not exactly sure anybody ever attains humility, but you can practice it, right?
Yeah.
What are your observations about this particular practice?
It's one of my favorite topics, and I've actually, in my opinion, have written about it in 3 books, right? So this most recent book with Practice Humility, but I also wrote about it in The Leadership Killer, and the subtitle for that book is Reclaiming Humility in an Age of Arrogance. And I wrote it in my book, A Leadership Kick in the Ass, in that those setback moments become a moment where humility can come in. In fact, Clint Hurdle, the then coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates, he said he's learned that there's 2 kinds of leaders: those who have been humbled and those who are about to be, because everybody's going to get humbled. And the more your ego's involved, the more likely you are to have a reverberation of a natural consequence of that and to get humbled. Humility is an interesting topic, right? Because it's hard to do surveys and say, rate yourself on humility.
I was going to ask you, are you humble, Bill? I was going to ask you that.
Right. And me and the co-author of my previous book, The Leadership Killer, we both readily admit, like, okay, we're not the poster child of humility. We suffer from hubris ourselves many times, and it's always gotten us into trouble. What I can say, though, is I definitely have learned to appreciate it, and I do think that it's a practice. I remember maybe a year or 2 ago, I think before COVID, I was on the stage with the CEO owner of a company that my longest running client. And there were 300 people, project managers and above, in the audience. And on the stage, spontaneously, put him on the spot a little bit. I said, what's something about leadership you didn't fully appreciate, but over the years you've come to appreciate more as an important characteristic of leadership? And he thought for a second, and he said humility. And this is a take charge kind of construction guy, and the viewpoint was the ability to listen to other points of view without interrupting, regardless of level, and to truly take in what that other person has to say. And it requires, biting the tongue, putting the finger on the lips, taking in, listening, heeding, considering. And the part of the key of that is the regardless of rank. This Navy SEAL that I had written my previous book with, Captain John Coach Havlick, he talked about when he was a Navy SEAL officer that he learned it was really important. You got to get off the bridge. You got to get out of the rarefied air up there where you're all breathing your own stale air and walk the deck plates. You got to go to where the work is happening, because you will learn stuff there that you can't see up here. So I think that has, to me, a lot to do with humility, and to recognize in this big, vast universe that's infinite, we are just a tiny speck for a small piece of time. Get over yourself, get over your rank, get over your accumulation of wealth. At the end of the day, there's an old Italian proverb: the pawn and the king go back in the same box, right? And so it's an important thing to remember, humility.
Yes. Thanks for that. And I heard several things that people can try in the practice of humility, beginning with listen. In leading people, I wanted to think about nurtured talent. And the reason I wanted to think about nurtured talent, and there's a whole list here for people watching and listening. There's a whole list of 2-word principles. I'm picking out nurtured talent, which is chapter 9. And the reason I want to talk with you about it, Bill, is I think organizations some don't, they just kind of throw people in, but others are trying to nurture talent, but I think they're frustrated with it. They're not always getting the results out of nurturing or trying to nurture and train talent. So what are your thoughts about how to successfully nurture talent?
It's super critical. I think first of the first-time leader, the most common ailment, I think, of new leaders is the inability to delegate. Because first of all, you're as an individual contributor, you're knocking out items on your own to-do list. You're very productive, and you do a great job singularly. And your boss or somebody takes notice and says, let's reward that by now giving you people. Well, what made you successful was all your own productivity. So you start being productive with other people's jobs and such, and you start wanting to know what they're doing at depth, and you take on too much. Super common, the most common thing that I see with new leaders. But you get to a point where you get subsumed. And honestly, the most frequent way that people learn how to delegate is sheer capitulation. They surrender. They're like, I have no choice. I'm going to have to figure out a way to trust and get to delegation. I see delegation as super important to nurturing talent, because you're offloading tasks that you do that you're probably outgrowing, that somebody else on your team that works under your leadership would benefit by doing. Mm-hmm. So it's an important part of your development is to develop others through delegation. That's one thing. It'll free you up. It'll make it less of your job, less of a burden. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd say is, now I go to the senior level. I remember working with a senior group at the company I left, which was Accenture, when I started with my own business, and they were one of my first clients. And I was doing some work with Accenture up in Chicago, and the group of leaders, and they're like, Bill, I get it. I totally hear what you're saying. I believe in leadership. I want to be a good leader. I just don't have a time. I just don't have the time. In the old days, I could go and sit and have lunch, spend time explaining the industry and where we're going. Now I'm so busy, I have to sit at my computer like it's a respirator and eat a Subway sandwich at lunch. And I felt sad for that person, right? It's like, we know that development is important, but it seems like a time investment that, given all our demands, given how thinly staffed we are in this post-COVID moment, I don't have time to develop people. But if you're not investing in people, you're going to be even more thinly staffed over time. So I don't know that I gave you an answer other than speaking to the importance of it, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did talk some about delegating, which I totally 100% agree. Like, if you want to nurture talent, I've worked with some leaders about delegate for development, know where this person wants to go, what their skills are, what their goals are, and then figure out which of the projects that are going on around best suit those goals. Delegate for development, which has been, I think, a shift in thinking for some of the folks that I've worked with. So I think nurturing talent by delegation is a wonderful and interesting, because you would normally think, well, you got to send them off to training. They need to go to a conference. They need to read a book. And what you're saying is, and it's very actionable when you think about delegating, which is one of the things I love about your book. You got the theory to practice thing at the end, here's the action steps, truth to practice kind of stuff, and discussion questions, and then action, and it goes beyond discussion to action. So the whole thing is right up my alley. Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in section 3, it's leading work. So section 1, leading yourself. And we just picked out chapter 5, talk about humility. So, part 2 of the book is leading people. And we just picked out chapter 9, nurturing talent, just to highlight there. And then leading work, that's part 3. And you got to talk about getting results.
Yeah.
And every high-level leader, I mean, that's what they want to think about, what they want to talk about, and what they need to see. What are the keys here to getting results?
So, yeah, I was very conscious about, I call it kind of leadership fitness, the 3 areas that you really need to attend to be fit to lead. You got to lead yourself, right? That's the self-exploration, self-awareness, self-care, leading others, as we talked about, developing others, building trust, etc. But you do those things when you're in a leadership role because you got to get stuff done. And a lot of leaders will use an S word, but it won't be stuff. You got to get stuff done, right? And that matters. And that's how you're going to be judged as a leader. That stuff, the other stuff we talked about is absolutely important. It's the 3-legged stool. You got to lead yourself, got to lead others for the purpose of getting results. And there is a pressure of results that will always be on you. And that pressure will never go away. It will be incessant. So you as a leader, particularly a new leader, you got to get on with it. You have to recognize that you feel that sense of anxiety. You're probably biting your nails and not sleeping well early on in your leadership. But that feeling of pressure isn't going to go away. So you're going to have to figure out how to accept the fact that, okay, I live under this win-loss column, much like a coach of an athletic team, and I'm going to have to produce results. And by the way, it's how I get those results is not my own output. It's me helping my team be as successful as they can be by removing barriers to their performance, giving them training, giving them mentoring and development, building trust, giving them feedback, getting feedback from them, listening, humility, the whole thing. So I've got to invest in that because that's my ticket to getting those results.
When are you going to come out of your shell, Bill? I'm just curious.
I know. There's not a chapter in there about honoring my introversion, which I should.
Yes.
Yeah. So that idea of recognizing that your success as a leader is going to be judged by those results. Now, a lot of leaders will fixate on that, and they will. I heard a senior executive once say, "If you're not part of the bulldozer, you're part of the pavement." And they like to bulldoze their way through. We're going to get the results supreme. Whatever happens, I don't care if I leave a wake of wreckage behind me. I'm getting those results. But so they're so fixated on the results that they forget that the means to result is all the other stuff that the book talks about. I will add that to help you get results, leading is one thing, but you've got to be good at managing, right? Like you've got to be a good planner. You've got to be able to control. You've got to be able to lower risk. You've got to be able to assess performance. And yes, you need to clarify expectations and you need to monitor progress. And that's not micromanagement. That's just good management. So you got to be a good manager too, to get the results, to be a good leader.
Yeah, I can see you've been at this a while because you just listed off like 5 or 6 things, measure results and, track progress. And it's like, if I'm a new leader, it's like, hold, I got to get this because there's a lot going on there. Yeah. Well, there are, I think let me just look here, 14 chapters in the book. So there are these 14 2-word principles, everything from know yourself to lead up at the end, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to ask you what's your favorite one, or one of your favorites. But before I do, I just want to touch on leading up because this also is a real challenge for leaders, people who are making the transition into leadership. What are your suggestions on leading up?
Yeah, we often talk about managing up or managing down and such, but I think leading up is recognizing, yes, we talked about part of the key to your being successful as a leader. You can't be successful as a leader unless you help your people be successful, right? And that's the servant leadership flip from you don't work for me, I actually work for you. That said, your boss is part of this equation. The people that are leading you are part of this equation. You have to be very clear on what the goals are of the division and the department and the business group you're working with, and what the goals of your boss is. What are the goals that matter most to them? So part of leading up is making sure that whenever you have an ask of your boss, when you need a request for more resources, it's always connecting it to what's important to that person and positioning it around, hey, you said that these things are important. For me to get those things, I'm going to need this thing, right? It's leading your boss in those directions. It's also being aware of critical business concerns. They're the things that are always on the senior executive minds, like lowering risk. That's a big thing to senior executives. Certainly safety in many organizations. Yes, psychological safety, we want that. It's gigantically popular right now. But in many organizations, like construction companies I work with, like it's preeminent. People need to go home at night, right? In the same condition they came in. So physical safety, operational excellence, certainly the acquisition and retention and building of relationships with customers, because that matters to senior executives. Modernizing the business is on the mind of senior executives. And of course, and this one is definitely on the mind of executives, is preserving margin, making profit, and lowering costs. And you as a person that works for those people need to be conscious of those things, because that's what they're thinking about all the time. So leading up is connecting, first of all, being conscious of those things, and then connecting your asks and aspirations to those things and driving work into so that they do make things safer, they do lower risk, they do modernize, they do acquire customers, they do make profit. Those are the kinds of things I'm thinking of when it comes to leading up.
Mm-hmm. Great. So there are 14 chapters. What's one of your favorites?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I
know they're all your babies.
They're all my.
Yes, don't. If you pick one, you offend all the rest.
I'm going to give you a writ large answer in terms of chapters that I think for me are fun and maybe the most important and maybe even a little unique. And then I'll give you a granular idea from the book that I think is really important for anybody. But the writ large one is, love business. Love business. When you're a new leader, it can be really intimidating to be around these important people that have a certain stature that people are deferring to, and you see them and think, oh, they know so much. I'll never know about the business as much as they do. I remember the first time, Dan, I heard the word EBITDA. It's a accounting term, earning before appreciation and before depreciation and taxes and amortization. And it was a strange foreign concept, but all the people in the room, the senior executives, were talking, oh, I'm really concerned about our EBITDA. I'm like, EBITDA? That sounds like a word from Mars. I felt so small and insignificant, like I don't know anything about business if they're talking about this stuff. And I know how new leaders sometimes feel that. First, just take it in. It's going to be a while. You're on a marathon. It's not a sprint. Take time with the journey of your career and recognize that business is this wonderful canvas where you're going to be able to apply your creativity, where you're going to co-create with other people, where you're going to shape decisions that are going to better people's lives, where you're going to be able to activate your own leadership and hopefully activate the leadership of others. It's a wonderful opportunity. You're probably going to spend more time at work than at home for many years. You might as well lean into and get interested in and itch your interest for the idea of business itself, because it's super fascinating and it's a fun landscape to play on. Okay. So love business. That's the
big, okay.
That's the big one. At the smaller, more individual level, I have found in coaching that people need to hear this a lot. And it was told to me at one point in time, and I've never forgotten the words. But, as a leader, particularly as you move on in your leadership, other things will be a priority. Your results are going to be a priority. Pleasing your boss is going to be a priority. Getting results is going to be a priority. Making money for the company is going to be a priority. Your family is going to be a priority, right? And balancing the tensions of that. But slowly over time, you may get lower on that list of prioritization, and you may get really low on it. And that has consequences. And so fidelity to all those other things matter. But personal fidelity, those two words are magic words. And it's not about selfishness. It's about self-respect, to set aside time for your own sanity break, time for self-care, time for reflection, and recognizing that you have needs and wants, and that is good, and it's healthy to have those things. Yes, serve others. You need to as a leader, and you will. But never forget to personal fidelity. We've got one life to live, and you want to make sure that you honor yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. I get antsy when people start talking about self-care. I'm a farm boy from Maine originally, and we don't believe in self-care. And you just get up and keep going all the time, which is arrogant and unrealistic and not true. You know what I mean? But
Sure. Well, for me, first of all, it can be a long walk with your dog, right? But I find that the reflection, as much as is even as important as physical, from the standpoint that so many people like this stuff, just distraction. Our brain is in the shallows, playing in the shallow water a lot, just skimming the surface really fast as we flip through the pages on our phone. And just to be able to take quiet reflection times at depth, like I told you, I worked with a lot of construction companies. Sometimes my coaching advice to a project manager, senior project manager, is when you're going home, stop at a parking lot in your truck, turn off the radio, turn off the music, roll down your windows, get some fresh air, and just be quiet for 5 minutes of pivot time. COVID brought me back to a lot of spiritual literature that I had lost sight of, that had really been important to me at a certain point in my career. But I started reconnecting with it. And now I'm pretty faithful to, in the morning, I read a paragraph. It comes from a book that's called The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday.
Okay, yep.
2,000-year-old wisdom from Seneca and Epictetus and mostly Marcus Aurelius, but Seneca. And I read a simple paragraph from 2,000 years ago, and I can't tell you how many times it is contemporary to what's going on with me. I then reflect on it. I start off my day first with sensory perception. What do I hear outside? What temperature is going on? What thought is floating through my head? I get sensorily alive, and then I read my little, paragraph. It takes like 5 minutes.
Right.
5 minutes, but it centers me, it grounds me, it gets me ready for the day, instead of just jumping into listening to some shock jock on the radio or political angertainment and wedging our society apart. Instead of starting all of that crazy stuff, I start with silence. And I think it's, and that to me is part of self-care. Even a farm boy from Maine can do that.
Even a farm boy from Maine can do that. And, it's interesting because little rituals and practices, I think, matter. One of the problems with our day is that we don't have the practice or any rituals that allow us to stop one thing and start another. So the day feels like it's this constant thing. And at the end of that day, it's like we're exhausted. We don't know really what happened because we didn't stop and start. I started a practice a while ago of on coaching calls, doing my best for a 50-minute call. And then I take, before every call, 3 minutes, and I just close my eyes. I breathe for about a minute. Then I think about the person I'm going to be talking with, what I respect about them, what I admire about them. And then I think about how I want to show up for them. Now, it's only 3 minutes. That's all it is. But it's an end to one thing and a prep for the next thing. And now I can show up like the person I want to be. Very, very simple.
Yeah, I love it. And yet so important, right? Yeah. To stop all the other chatter with whatever you were involved with and attend to this in front of you.
Absolutely. So I'm with you. That morning ritual sets a tone for the day. All about it. So thanks for that.
I want to share with you that, the great Ken Blanchard, I know you know who Ken Blanchard is, in our field. He's a giant, right? And he talks about, it's a critical question that leaders need to think about. How do you start your day? And his recommendation is like easing into your day.
Yeah.
And that he makes a joke of it. Most of us wake up when the alarm goes off.
Yes, right.
Alarm. He's like, why don't we call it the opportunity clock? Why do we call it? We start our day with alarm, right? I think that's
Yeah,
great.
I was in West Palm Beach the first time I heard him. He was talking about start the day slowly. It's like I get up, my heart's racing. I'm filled with the adrenaline. It's like hurry up and take a shower, hurry up and do this. It's like no, 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 no. So get up 10 minutes earlier, and then you can instead of run to the shower, you can walk to the shower.
Right?
Well, anyway, thanks so much for the book. Leadership, two words at a time, simplicity, clarity, great stuff. And your audience is that emerging leader, that person who is transitioning into, it's good for everybody. But you're saying, the people you're thinking about the most are these people who are just going into leadership. And believe me, the business world is in huge transition. I mean, this turnover, people going out, new people coming in, people getting new hires galore. It's a big, big thing. So thank you for the book. I wish you well with it. And thanks for your
Yeah.
time today.
Well, let me thank you, Dan. You've been at this a long time, making a real and a great contribution to leadership development and your focus on leaders. And you've really advanced the practice of leadership for your dedication. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks.